Salute is a program for and about men and women who have served our country. Our program includes news about the laws that affect veterans, information on benefits and services, and news from veterans organizations. And now, our host, Bob Peters.
Hello and welcome to Salute. I'm your host, Bob Peters, and with me is Tony Figueroa. Tony is a Marine, because once a Marine, always a Marine, right, Tony?
Correct.
And you served in the military from 1948 to 1970. You had quite a career, my friend. Korea, Vietnam, in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Awarded a Bronze Star with the Combat V, 4 Purple Hearts, Combat Action Ribbon, and others, right?
Correct.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, sir.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for inviting me.
And just tell us about yourself. You're originally from...
Yeah, I come from the city of New York, Upper West Side. I was born in downtown, and I didn't remember the hospital, but anyway, it was Annunciation Church where I was baptized. And I grew up in that part of the neighborhood. This part of the neighborhood is just bordered on NYC, the college up there, and then the other side is Columbia University. And at a very early age, I went in the Marine Corps. I thought I wanted to always be a Marine, and that was what was my desire. First time I seen a Marine Corps picture with Wallace Berry. I don't know if you know Wallace Berry.
Yeah, I remember.
First time I seen him as a Marine over there, and I said, that's what I wanted to be. I must have been about 10 years old, you know. And of course, Second World War had broke out, you know, and I followed everything the Marines did during the Second World War. I was an avid reader of newspapers and anything the Marines did. When the Marines went into Tarawa, and of course, when they went into Guadalcanal, I was ecstatic with that. And of course, Tarawa, when Tarawa went on, we got the news report, but that I thought that was amazing. And of course, all the way up to the campaign, and Iwo Jima would come along, you know, that was great. I knew I was going to be a Marine, and there was nothing stopping me right there and there, and I did become a Marine.
Yes, sir. You had quite a career.
Yeah.
So you went, you enlisted and went to Parris Island, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, and then from there, I went to Camp Lejeune. In Camp Lejeune, I went up to Little Creek, Virginia. And up in Little Creek, we went up there, demonstration troops. I was TAD for my outfit, and we stayed up there for quite a while up there. And all I did was, stay with the demonstration troops. And we demonstrated for the midshipmen and for show how Marines land and how to come off a Mike boat. And we landed on the beaches, and we did this stuff, and we did other things up there. And then I made corporal up there, and then right from there, I remember the Korean War broke out, and we came back. My initial outfit had moved out, and when I came back, I joined up with another outfit to 2nd Tank Battalion, and I was there maybe a month when they said, you're going down to Parris Island to become a drill instructor. And they shipped 42 of us down there, NCOs, corporals and sergeants, and we went down to Parris Island. And I never seen Parris Island at this here time. 1950 in Parris Island was the most hectic place I ever seen in my life. They were bringing recruits. Now, normally Parris Island has 2 recruit battalions at that time. The 3rd Battalion was also reserved for the women Marines. The 1st and 2nd Battalion were the recruit battalion. When I got down there in 1950, Parris Island had 5 battalions. The 5th Battalion, I went to the 5th Battalion. Now, where are you going to put all these people and build them? Well, the parade field now became a tent city.
Oh, really?
Right on the parade field, that was the 5th Battalion. And then, of course, later on, they had the 6th Battalion. Part of that went to the rifle range, and then they actually had 8 battalions at one time, but that was reduced then in 1950, summer of 51. In summer of 51, Parris Island became what they call PLC and OCS because Quantico, Virginia couldn't handle all the incoming officers. So Parris Island took the weight off and reduced the recruit training only to the 2 battalions, and the rest of us went to OC training. And I stayed there till 1952. In 1952, I got my orders, went to Korea. Because by that time I made sergeant. I went to Korea, went to Camp Pendleton, and Camp Pendleton was the receiving station over there, and we trained at Camp Pendleton, and then we shipped over. Went overseas and on a ship. Of course, we took 11 days, crowded with Marines. That was an experience. Crossed the international date line, and that was an experience.
Air-conditioned cabinets and everything.
Oh boy, yes, certainly. The decks down there were 8 high. I mean, people don't believe when you say 8 high. Yes, they were 8 high. They were 8 high down in the compartments. And then we got to Korea. I was assigned to the 1st Marine Regiment. 1st Marine Division, obviously, was there. And the 1st Marine Regiment had moved from the east to the west of Korea at that time. And we were on the western front, right outside of Seoul. And when we went to 1st Marine Regiment, they were in Corps Reserve at the time. And we got the call to move up to the lines. We moved up to the lines. They were still negotiating the peace treaty at that particular time. And we were getting rumors in it. Spatic fighting was going on. But the day we moved up to the lines and we got across the bridge and moving into position, the battalion was in a column moving up. Of course, you got to visualize this column behind these row of hills. Hills called Old Baldy, the Hook, and Boulder City. These were all the hills assigned. We were going behind the hills. And it was the first time I'd been in combat. All hell broke loose. I never seen anything like it in my entire life. The Chinese laid their 76 artillery pieces in on us. Next thing I know, we got shelled. The shelling went on for almost 4.5 hours and never stopped.
Wow.
They said the more artillery shells did that one sector than all history of shelling in any place. Of course, later on, I seen some pictures of the potholes, the shell holes. It looked like a moonscape. There was just holes all over the place.
Craters, yeah.
Up there. Well, we were in the middle of that shelling. Finally, that morning, we were pinned down on the road, and finally we got out to our position up there. And the platoon leader had signed me with the 2nd platoon to link up with them on the Hook. They went on the Hook. I'll never forget this because I couldn't understand at the time why we were doing this, because the other 2 squads now went with Lieutenant Lindquist, and Lieutenant Lindquist was later on killed, and they moved up the Hook. They tied in with the Australians, and then when I got to my outpost, I noticed my outpost was a finger way out in front of the line, and there was a drawer in between. This is where I got my Bronze Star, by the way. The Chinese made 2 assaults that night, and of course repelled the assaults. The one assault placed us back up on top of the hill, and then I was ordered to go back down and take the positions. We took the positions. And this is where it gets interesting for me, anyway. Once we get down there, dawn was breaking, and I noticed where the other 2 squads were. Now that's about almost 35 to 40 yards away. In between is a minefield, and there's a drawer. Well, I had a trench line. I could see people coming out of the trench line. I see this Marine coming out of the trench line, did not recognize him. He was left over from the 5th Marines that we relieved. Never got out of there.
Really?
And I was amazed. He says, there are Chinese all over the place. He says, they're in the bunkers. I asked him about the 2 squads. He didn't know. He says, he just made his way down to this position. So we got him out. The next thing I know, I spot people from the other squads trying to come across carrying their wounded. Well, they had one badly wounded individual. Sergeant Eaches, who's a platoon sergeant, came down to my position at that time. And to get this wounded man through the trench line would have been impossible. And I says, we got to get him over the top of the hill. We must have been a sight to see coming to the top of the hill. We were exposed to machine gun and mortar fire. He grabbed one end of the stretcher and I ran in. That was a long trip going up that hill. But I don't know why we weren't killed, but we were dodging fire because there was erratic fire going all over. I could hear the rounds busting. We carried them up on top of the hill. We made it all the way up to the top. I guess everybody at the top of the hill was wondering how we made it up there alive. That's when I got my Bronze Star, saving another Marine's life, taking him up there into the helicopter. And after Korea, I came back to the States and went to Brooklyn Navy Yard.
Don't want to interrupt you, but I want to. You told me something before about the armistice, signing of the armistice.
Oh, yes.
I'd like you to mention that because I never heard that before.
Oh, yes. Anybody who's on there, July the 27th or 26th, in this case, 1953, you had to be on the MLR, meaning the main line of resistance. If you're on the main line of resistance, what they did, they sent down this clipboard, and each squad had this clipboard, stack of papers, and you had lines on there, and it said, by the UN, United Nations, you had to sign this agreement that you're agreeing to the ceasefire agreement. Every Marine, anybody who was on the front line had to sign that. Where these documents are at, I don't know. But there must have been thousands of signatures on that because there was over a whole division on the line. That's over 2,200 men, 2,200 men, 200,000 men up on the on the line. So it was a lot of people plus the Army and so on the line. But yes, you do have to sign. You had to sign that you
I
agreed.
thought that was interesting.
Yeah. You had to sign the agreement, yes. And then from there, like I said, Brooklyn Navy Yard, that was interesting. I always said this, and I don't mean to dispute the Brooklyn Navy Yard, but I think I've seen more combat in Brooklyn Navy Yard than I've seen.
My father was from Brooklyn.
It was as hectic and comical in some instances too, Brooklyn Navy Yard. And Brooklyn Navy Yard no longer exists, but it was built back in the 1800s, and we still had the same old barracks. And that was interesting, living in the barracks up there. There were Marines in the 1860s and 1850s, lived in the same barracks we lived in up there. And later,
they added plumbing by that time, right?
Yeah, they added plumbing, but you still had the carriage gate. And that was an interesting story itself, the carriage gate. First time I seen the carriage gate when I went to Brooklyn Yard, I couldn't understand what it was. And then, of course, it explained to me. At that time, they had carriages, and they had to go through the carriage gate. And, of course, later on, they built something where you can get through up there. So you had a sentry booth, and it stood right there, and the carriage came through to the sentry booth, and then we went through the other side. Our carriage gate is an arch thing.
I was going to ask you to explain it.
Yeah, it's an arch thing, and you had to go through an arch gate up there. So later on, they had vehicles going not through the carriage gate, but through the other side of it, and of course they made a path going through for cars. But what they did, if you weren't allowed to go through, they had a big anchor chain that set across this here road, and of course when the cars were not allowed to go through, they put this anchor chain on. Of course the guards put this anchor chain on. Now the idea of the anchor chain is when somebody comes up, they weren't allowed the gate, and you had to park your car outside and do your business in. Only authorized vehicles come through. Mm-hmm. This one incident with this here sergeant, who at that time, he had 3 Purple Hearts. I'll never forget him. He was in charge of the gate at this time, this evening. And what happened, he had a couple of cars coming through. But he put the anchor chain down. He didn't put it across at this time because he was logging in. This taxi cab came up, and of course, in back of the taxi cab was a commander. And the commander told the taxi driver, just drive on through. Well, now we had an unauthorized vehicle inside of Brooklyn Navy Yard, this taxi with this commander. Now the commander, the way the story goes, wanted to go to his ship because he ran out of money. He wanted to get some more money and out of his locker. And they would try to find the car because Brooklyn Navy Yard was so vast, we didn't know where the car went, the taxi cab went. Well, they never put the chain back up, which was the mistake. Well, the commander came back out with the same taxi cab. The sergeant on the gate was so frustrated at the fact that the cab came in. When the cab tried to leave, believe it or not, he took out his .45 and emptied the 5 rounds in the back of the cab. Didn't kill anybody. But what happened, the cab driver got so excited, he hit the curbs. Now the curbs in Brooklyn at that time, they had to be at least 8 inches high. I never seen curbs like that. But the wheel hit the curb. Next thing I know, this cab went upside down and laid down, 4 wheels still rolling. The commanding crawling out, the taxi driver calling out, and there's this sergeant standing with a smoking gun cursing at them, you son of a, you go through. Of Because the chain was never up. That was the incident. That was my first incident in the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
Yeah.
It didn't stop. After 3 years later, it did not stop.
I wonder what the career was like for that sergeant after that.
Oh, well, he was relieved.
He's following
because-
orders,
yeah,
though. You gotta
he
do what you gotta
followed-
do, you know?
That's right. But that was that was the comical incident. Like I said, nobody was hurt. But that was the first thing I seen in Brooklyn Navy, and I says, "Oh my God! I just came back in Korea, seeing all the shooting going on now in Brooklyn Navy Yard." We had another incident just before I left, where we had a young Marine, very young, on post 12. Post 12 is probably the longest pier, probably in the Atlantic Ocean, in Brooklyn Navy Yard. It was for vessels coming in, and they had to stop out there. The thing was almost a mile long. It was the longest pier. Schaefer's Brewery was right down the river, right down in the bay. This is February. It's cold.
It's
I
icy.
got a Marine on duty with an M1 rifle. He's at the end of the pier, walking up down to the end of the pier. He could hear this tugboat coming down, trying to come into port. And it was because it was foggy, he was trying to navigate by the lights. Of course, this young Marine challenged him. Halt, who goes there? Halt, who goes there? Well, he got the third response. Nobody said anything. Took his rifle off his shoulder, loaded his clip in there, rolled the bolt back, and he one more time. Halt, who goes there? Actually fired all 8 rounds at the tugboat. Nobody was hurt, but they dove over the side. You know, we had that tugboat going around in circles out there by itself till the Coast Guard come up there. It stopped it. Because we secured post 12. No more. No Marines on post 12 being armed. That was the end of it.
Okay, I want to move on because we only have so much time. And
Okay.
I don't want to run out of time because I know you want to talk about, after Korea, you went to Vietnam.
Yes, went to Vietnam. Interesting in Vietnam. You got to understand, I moved my family. First time I came to Orlando was 1960. 66. Sight unseen. We came because people we knew were down here. I rented a place, put my wife and my children down here. I said goodbye, went to the airport. In those days, the airport down there was McCoy Air Force Base, and you had to walk out to the flight line and get on the aircraft. Flew out there to California. I was told when I got to California, you're going to stand by. We don't have any flights going out right now, but we'll let you know. Anyway, that evening they woke me up, told me to get dressed. We're going to take a bus, and we got over to El Toro, and I met a whole bunch of Marines up there. Now this is day 2, 1, 2. This is day 2, and we met a bunch of Marines. We didn't know when we were going to get our flight, but we flew out of there, flew to Hawaii, and got to Okinawa. Now this is going to be interesting, this story, when I get to the end of it on day 5. I'm in Okinawa now on day 3. Told us, stand by, there's no flights going into Nam just yet. Again, they called us out. Hey, we got a flight for you guys. And there's 15 of us, got on there, NCOs. I got into Da Nang. Now I'm in Da Nang, going to spend the night in Da Nang. And of course, they said they were going to assign us, and I was assigned to the 7th Marines. And I'm going to go up to 3rd Battalion because they need a gunnery sergeant up there. Well, they flew me by helicopter, and I get up there in Da Nang, and they said, well, you're going down to Chulai. So from Da Nang, Da Nang went to Chulai. Went to Chulai, and I met my company, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, and I was assigned. The company commander was Captain Droughty, who later became General Droughty later on. Now, this is the 5th day. General Droughty says, Gunny, why don't you just take it easy? We have to go out on patrol tomorrow. The company, we're going on a truck patrol. He said, but you sit up and get your gear. I said, no, I like to go and see what the company does. Okay. So I took the last Jeep, and we went on patrol. This is day 5. I'm in Nam now. When we got to this position where he was supposed to meet some people up there, were supposed to give him some information about VC activity. When we got there, I got out of the Jeep, and no sooner I got out of the Jeep, we got hit with machine gun fire. I never seen anything like it in my life. Man, Marines were just jumping out of the trucks. Next thing I know, and this was probably the greatest thing I ever seen, Marines doing actual classic fire team maneuver, rushing the fire. Couldn't believe it. But the enemy probably thought, what the heck? We're going to move out. So they dislodged the enemy. We kept moving up till we got to the hill we called Tyndall Hill. We called it Tyndall Hill. By that time, I took the radio operator's rifle. I got into the action also because there was shooting going all over the place. I remember being behind this tree, sitting down there, shooting at it where I suspected there was firing coming from. Next thing I knew, I was shot in the head. I laid out. I was in country 5 days. My wife already received the telegram that I was wounded.
Yeah.
5 days from the day I said goodbye, the 5th day, she got a 6 days, she got the telegram that I was wounded. Lucky enough, though, the company commander said, you get down to Mars. Mars was the military, what they did, they had volunteers, and they did the communication bit, ham radio at the time. And I was allowed to call my wife, tell her it was all right. I mean, the bullet went right through my helmet, came out the other side, hit the buckle, and I bled like a stuffed pig. But it hit small arteries in there where I bled. I thought my head was off because I woke up and I was being dragged. I remember that. I was being dragged, and then when I woke up, and they cleaned me up. I never left the area. I stayed. They wanted me to medevac me out. I said, I'm going to stay. So
How long was your tour over there? You did multiple tours or what?
Well, later on, I went back. Yeah, I went back there. Normal tour duty for a Marine was 13 months. 13 months you rotated. But what happened was I received my 3rd Purple Heart, and it was an automatic ship you out. And that was on my 12th month. So it didn't make a difference.
Really?
Getting ready to leave anyway.
Yeah.
So I got wounded for the 3rd time, and I was told that was it. Pack up your bags and leave. And I left now.
You know, Tony, this show is only a half hour long. I've got about 7 minutes left, and
Okay.
you have so much more to show us. I'd like you to show the pictures that you brought along, and then I'd like you to talk a little bit about that movie.
Okay. Well, we made a movie. A gentleman named Eugene Jones, who was a combat photographer who worked for NBC and ABC, and did a lot of, in fact, he did the Iwo Jima thing, him and his brother, twin brother. Well, Gene Jones was retired, and somehow he convinced the Secretary of Navy at that time to allow him and a team to go to Nam to do something of a reality show. He wanted to photograph a Marine unit in actual combat for a long period of time, without any commentary, without any, just themselves.
Yeah.
So that was probably the first reality show that was done in '67. So Gene Jones came over there with 3 other photographers, sound man. The 3 were British, and Gene Jones was the only American. In fact, when I asked the 3 British, I said, would they like to have rifles while they were in this here? Because we're in the combat base.
Right.
And one of the British, Chris, his name was, said, in his British accent, he said, no, we have our passports to protect us. Let me tell you something. It was 2 days later when they got ambushed, he asked for a rifle.
Yeah, I bet.
And they got rifles. Well, anyway, they stayed with us for 97 days and photographed what they call the face of war. It was Eugene's dream picture that he wanted to do. And he said, I have a copy of it, and I show it periodically to veterans groups, show it to high schools at sometimes, And it's very vivid. It's actual combat, actually ambushes, actually people getting blown up, that's sorry to say. And we have also a picture in there of a baby being born. It's amazing, actually a child being born. And the other interesting about this movie is we have Chaplain Vincent Capodanno in it. Vincent Capodanno was the chaplain who was awarded the Medal of Honor. He was killed. He was saying Mass in his movies. 5 days later, after he said Mass to us, he was over with the 5th Marines where he was killed and received the Medal of Honor. So the movie has a little bit of everything in it. And it has what they call a CAC unit. And I got a picture here of you could see some of the pictures in here, the CAC unit.
What does that mean, CAC unit?
Well, this was the combined. This was a brainchild of General Walt, who commanded all the Marines in the area. And what they did is a combined action team. They took these here villages and they wanted to protect themselves. They put Marines in the villages, We put a squad of Marines. We had a squad of Marines in what we call Tyndall. And we left the squad there. They lived with the villages, and they had their own, I guess you call a National Guard, or their Guard villages. And they did this throughout all of Vietnam. Of course, now you have this here squad in there, living with the villages. They're very sympathetic.
Hence those pictures, right?
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So these are my adopted children over here. These little children over here, they lost their father. He was killed. He was actually murdered by the VC. The mother's still alive. And what we did was we gave him medical treatment. The corpsman came down. We allowed the corpsman to come down. They had the protection of the Marines in the villages. The VC didn't come in and tax them or take their property or anything else. So each combat base had a village somewhere nearby, and we set a squad inside that village. So this was like I said, brainchild of General Walt's idea to put these cap units out there, and we had one squad out there. The night we were hit, on July 15th, the VC almost overrun us. Now that was the reason Gene Jones came out to my company 37 to do the photograph, because when he came into Nam and he seen General Walt, at that time on July 15th, we were attacked. We had a vicious attack. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, we lost 7 of my Marines were killed, 13 were seriously wounded, and the others were mildly wounded. But we beat back the attack, and it was amazing because they got into the perimeter, and everybody had to do hand-to-hand combat. So when Gene Jones heard about this is where he wanted to come out. So he came out to Mike 37, and this is what he did this for the entire period. Stayed with us for 97 days. In 97 days, he photographed everything that you could imagine. Each member of the team did his own bit of talking.
Show us the rest of the pictures, because, you know, Tony, I'm almost out of time. I only got about a minute and a half left.
Well, you allowed me to talk.
I know, but you know, you got so much to talk about, and I'm trying to cover some of it. The picture you're holding there.
Yeah, this is my first trophy. I've been winning trophies ever since. I'm a shooter, combat shooter. In fact, I'm shooting tomorrow in a match, okay, IDP match. But this is my first trophy I received for the regimental.
You know, you got that look on your face like, make my day.
Yeah. This is me at DI school. I was the chief drill instructor at DI school. I ran the school. And this is Smokey Bear hat. This is me with the DI school. This next picture here is me with Mike 3. This is what Gene Jones took of me. This is me going on patrol, and Gene went with us on patrol. And this is something interesting. If you can notice down here, this grenade down here, on that mission, I had a bullet pierce that grenade. Within inches, it gouged it out. Within inches,
Wow.
gouged out the side of the grenade. Didn't know about it till I got back, and one of my sergeants spotted the grenade, said, "Gunny, look at the grenade, look what happened to it." And if it had been over maybe 3/4 of an inch over, the grenade would have detonated because it hit the primer. It would probably, well, I wouldn't be here today talking, it would have blown up. But we had a lot of firefights.
Yeah, I bet you, I know you've seen your share. Yeah. And unfortunately, I'm out of time now. See how quick this works? I mean, you know, you Korea, Vietnam, and then you were also, we didn't get to talk about it, but you were over there with the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I really, you know, maybe you can come back and we could do another show.
Someday we'll do that,
you know?
another show.
But I want to thank you for coming on the show,
Thank you,
my friend.
Bob, for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
I'm really looking forward to seeing some of that movie. And we'll be
show.
together again.
Okay.
So I have to say goodbye. So this is the way we do that. To all our veterans out there, our active military and their families, we salute you for all you do. Till next time.
Semper Fi.
That's right, baby. Lakefront TV. We're still looking for guests, and we'd love to have you on. We're proud of what we've done in the past. So give us a call at 352-728-9707 and check us out on the internet at lakefronttv.com. Spread the word and enjoy the show.